So let's talk about the carbon cycle now. It's important for us to understand how carbon cycles through ecosystems, because when we get to our unit that covers climate change, you'll understand why excess carbon is such an issue in the atmosphere. All right, so what you're going to notice with the carbon cycle is there are way more reservoirs, there's inputs and outputs than the water cycle. And some of these reservoirs hold carbon for a very, very long time. All right, so you guys have heard the term fossil fuels. Well, now you're really going to understand what it references. All right, so some of the reservoirs hold carbon for a long time. And so these are going to be things like a type of rock called limestone, and I'm sure you guys have heard that term, and seashells. Okay. Living organisms also cycle carbon. So think back to freshman biology when you learned about photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So living organisms recycle carbon between photosynthesis and respiration. Okay, now let's look at this chart right here. You can see there are red arrows and there are blue arrows. So the red arrows are going to be outputs. Okay, so red is an output, meaning it's escaping or leaving. And then blue is going to be an input. It's going into a reservoir or a sink. Okay, so I like to start with the easiest ones first. So let's look at some terms that you guys already know. Photosynthesis right here, cellular respiration. So you can see that photosynthesis is an input because plants absorb carbon dioxide out of the air. Respiration is an output because animals, we breathe out carbon dioxide as a waste product. Okay, so what I want you guys to understand is how much carbon is actually released into the atmosphere. So right here, human influence, that's carbon dioxide released. Combustion or burning of organic material, that's obviously a release as well. Respiration, we just talked about that. That is a release. Geologic activity, so volcanic eruptions, that is a release of carbon dioxide. Now, like I said, the blue lines are going to be inputs. So right here, in photosynthesis, it absorbs carbon dioxide. Okay, so that's what all of these blue arrows mean. There's an absorption of carbon dioxide. Okay, so let's talk about the inputs or the sinks of carbon. So photosynthesis obviously is simple. Plants use carbon dioxide to produce energy for themselves in the form of glucose, and then they will produce oxygen in return for us to breathe. Okay, so over here we have, this is runoff. This is water running off into an ocean, okay, through the process of erosion. So this is going to carry what we call sediments. just particles that contain carbon. That carbon then goes into the ocean. All right. We also can have carbon fall from precipitation into the ocean as well, and this process is called dissolution. So in dissolution, we have free carbon dioxide, and remember this is from the air. Free carbon dioxide is converted to, and I'm going to put here H2CO3. That's carbonate. Okay, H2CO3 in water. Okay, so free carbon dioxide is converted to carbonate in water. And if I were you guys, I would write down this as carbonate, because I doubt you'll remember this later. Okay, so carbon dioxide is taken out of the air, absorbed into the ocean, and is converted into carbonate, which is called dissolution. All right. Now, obviously we have photosynthesis happening in the water because we have aquatic plants. All right. So, the process of consumption, those carbon compounds get eaten by organisms in the water and on land. And living organisms are going to use carbon to form carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and protein in their body. You guys remember back from freshman biology, the chomp? That's what's happening here. Carbon is used to produce those biomolecules in animals. Okay, so this fish dies. So in the process of decomposition, that carbon is then put back into the ground. Okay, so this is also a release of carbon. Okay, when things die, it goes back into the ground, so there's where that carbon goes. And the same thing on the land too. So the squirrel, when it dies, would put carbon back into the soil. Okay, now here we have these cute little shellfish. So this is a little shellfish. Any cute? So as I said, let's go back to this carbonate ion. Shellfish will actually use carbonate from the water to make their shells. All right, so this carbonate is really important. It doesn't just sit there and go unused. Shellfish use it to produce their shells. So, shellfish use the H2CO3 to make shells. All right? Now, let's talk about sedimentation. This is here at the bottom. So, when things die in the ocean and on land, you have all of these things that just fall to the seafloor. So here's our fish skeleton. It falls to the seafloor. And through many, many years, and I'm talking about hundreds of years, the components, the carbon components that are in this ground will eventually get turned into limestone. Okay? So, let's put right here, as organisms die, the ocean floor, or the pieces fall to the ocean floor. This includes larger bodied mammals like whales too. So the pieces fall to the ocean floor. And create limestone. Okay, so limestone is a rock that is used a lot in the construction of buildings and whatnot. So it's a really important reservoir or storage of carbon as well. Okay, now let's talk about outputs. So here's this term, fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are going to be things like oil, natural gas, and coal. And this is also made from decomposed animal and plant life. Okay, so this is old carbon right here, just like in limestone, but this is produced because of added pressure in the ground. So that's how fossil fuels are made. You have this old decomposed organisms, just like here with sedimentation, but because of increased pressures, it creates different kinds of fossil fuels. Now, here's where the big difference is. We extract fossil fuels for energy production. So this is the human influence aspect. So this extraction and usage process is fast. Okay? The decomposition and the input in the creation of limestone and fossil fuels is very slow. So essentially, at this point, we're using these fossil fuels faster than they are being replenished. And that's why you see right here the human influence, we have double arrows, because we are doubling the amount of carbon dioxide being put into the atmosphere. And that is why we have such an issue with climate change now. So human influence is the greatest impact on the carbon cycle. And as you can see, the other outputs, the geologic activity, respiration, they're much smaller arrows, and it's just one arrow, because this is part of the normal process of the planet. This is not. This is added human influence. So we have to take that into consideration when we're talking about climate change. Okay, so I want to write down a couple of human impacts on the carbon cycle, and you guys have probably already figured what some of these are. Human impact. So obviously the first one is going to be deforestation. Okay, trees are a large sink, meaning they absorb lots of carbon dioxide. If we're cutting them down, then we're taking away a source of where carbon dioxide can go, and that just leaves more in the atmosphere. Okay, and then the other one we just referenced is going to be climate change. So increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere causes an increase in temperatures, causes more evaporation, which we just talked about with the water cycle. All right, guys, so this is the carbon cycle. We are going to move on to the nitrogen cycle next.